Dr. Elena Volkov had mapped 127 thermal vents without incident. The vent producing perfect steam spirals in Elja broke every rule. She camped nearby to document it. When she woke, her tent sat 200 yards away, boots clean, GPS showing 7 circles she couldn't remember. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Elena's hands shook as she checked her watch for the 3rd time in 2 minutes. 6:47 in the morning. She'd gone to sleep at 10:30 the night before. 8 hours, 17 minutes of her life, gone. The tent stakes still held firm in the volcanic soil, driven deep exactly as she'd placed them. But the tent wasn't where she'd pitched it. She knelt beside her boots. Yesterday afternoon, she'd crossed a muddy thermal pool, black volcanic silt coating the leather up to the laces. Now they sat outside her tent door, arranged in perfect parallel, not a speck of dirt on them. She picked one up, turned it over. The treads were clean, spotless, like someone had scrubbed them with a brush in running water. There was no running water for 15 miles. Her gas monitor sat on the ground next to her sleeping bag, its small screen glowing green. Carbon dioxide levels, normal. Hydrogen sulfide, trace amounts, well below danger threshold. She checked it obsessively before sleep, knowing the risks of camping near active geothermal features. Volcanic gases could kill you while you dreamed. Carbon dioxide pooling in low areas, heavier than air, suffocating you without warning. But the monitor had alarmed exactly 0 times during the night. Elena pulled out her GPS unit. The screen showed her current position as a blue dot. Her base camp coordinates marked 15 miles south. Between them, a neat trail of breadcrumb points traced her route from yesterday. She scrolled to the track log, selected the time range from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The route appeared on screen. Her breath caught. 7 perfect circles around the thermal vent, each one identical in diameter. The GPS had recorded her walking speed, 2.1 miles per hour, consistent throughout. She departed her tent at 11:47 p.m., completed the first circle at 12:23 a.m., and continued until 3:58 a.m. when the tracks showed her walking directly to this new position, 200 yards north. 4 hours, 11 minutes of walking. She zoomed in on the circles. They were mathematically precise, each circumference overlapping the last by no more than 3 feet. She'd walked 4.3 miles in a perfect geometric pattern around a thermal vent, and she remembered exactly none of it. Elena forced herself to breathe slowly. There were explanations. Carbon monoxide poisoning could cause memory loss, but her monitor read 0. Hypothermia could cause confusion and strange behavior, but the temperature had held steady at 42 degrees, and she'd been warm in her sleeping bag. Head injury could explain gaps in memory, but she ran her hands over her scalp, checked her pupils in her phone's camera. No lumps, no blood, pupils equal and reactive. She opened her research journal and wrote the date at the top of a new page. Her handwriting looked steady enough. She documented everything: the relocated tent, the clean boots, the GPS circles. She included her vital signs: pulse 78, slightly elevated, and her mental status check: alert, oriented to person, place, time. No headache, no nausea, no visual disturbances. On paper, she looked fine. On paper, this morning looked like she'd had a peaceful night's sleep and woken refreshed in a tent she'd pitched in a different location. The GPS told a different story. Elena packed her gear with methodical precision, forcing her hands to steady. First aid kit, water filter, emergency beacon. She checked each item against her mental inventory, looking for anything else that might have changed during the night. Everything was accounted for. Her satellite phone showed full battery, 3 bars of signal strength. She pulled up Bjorn's contact and hesitated. What would she tell him? That she'd sleepwalked 4 miles in perfect circles. That someone had cleaned her boots and moved her tent while she slept through it. She could already hear his response. Concern masking alarm, the careful tone people used when they thought you were losing it. He'd call for an emergency extraction. Her research permit would be flagged. 6 years of building credibility in Iceland's geological community, gone. She pocketed the phone without calling. The thermal vent sat 200 yards south, steam rising in those impossible spirals. Elena shouldered her pack and walked toward it, counting her steps. At 50 yards, she stopped and pulled out her compass. The needle spun lazily, unable to settle on magnetic north. She tapped the casing. The needle continued its slow rotation. Magnetic anomaly. That made sense near geothermal features. Superheated water rising through fractured bedrock could create localized distortions in the magnetic field. She documented similar effects at other sites, but those compasses had flickered, wavered. This one spun like it was mounted on a motor. She marked the position with a rock cairn and continued forward. At 30 yards, her handheld GPS unit beeped. The position lock had failed. The screen showed her coordinates jumping erratically, first placing her 100 yards east, then west, then showing an error message. She stopped, waited for it to reacquire satellites. After 2 minutes, it locked again, placing her exactly where she'd been standing, 20 yards from the vent. The steam rose in tight spirals, each rotation perfectly timed, the geometry so precise it looked machine-made. The morning sun caught the steam, and she could see the mathematical perfection clearly now. Fibonacci spirals, the same pattern found in seashells and hurricanes and galaxies. Nature made these patterns, but never this exact, never this clean. She pulled out her thermal camera and aimed it at the vent. The screen showed the heat signature, 194 degrees Fahrenheit at the source, cooling as the steam rose. Normal range for Icelandic thermal features. She walked a slow circle around it, maintaining her 20-yard distance, recording temperature readings every 10 degrees. All normal, all exactly what she'd expect from a standard fumarole, except for the steam. Elena knelt and examined the ground. The volcanic rock here was old, weathered smooth by centuries of wind and ice. But around the vent, in a perfect circle, roughly 15 feet in diameter, the surface looked different, worn, like thousands of footsteps had polished the rough basalt into something approaching glass. She pulled out her voice recorder and pressed record. Day 2, 6:47 a.m. local time. I'm documenting anomalous wear patterns around the thermal feature. The rock surface shows evidence of sustained traffic in a circular pattern around the vent. Approximately 15-foot radius. The wear is uniform, suggesting regular use over an extended period. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. The wear pattern matches the GPS track from last night. Elena spent the next hour photographing the vent from every angle. Wide shots showing the location relative to the surrounding lava field. Close-ups of the steam spirals. Macro shots of the worn stone. She documented everything with the focused intensity of someone building a case, gathering evidence that what she was seeing was real. Her scheduled check-in with Bjorn was at 6 p.m., 14 hours away. She could cover a lot of ground in 14 hours, get samples, run tests, maybe figure out what the hell had happened to her memory. Or she could pack up now, hike back to her base camp, and call this expedition a loss. She thought about the wear patterns on the rock, not recent, not from one night of walking. Those stones had been polished smooth over years, maybe decades, which meant other people had been here. Other people had walked these circles. The implications of that settled in her chest like cold water. Elena set up her equipment at 25 yards from the vent. Seismometer to detect any micro-tremors. Air quality monitor for continuous gas readings. Temperature probe driven 6 inches into the soil. She linked everything to her laptop and started recording data. Whatever was happening here, she'd have numbers to prove it. The coffee she'd made on her camp stove had gone cold. She drank it anyway, checking her watch. 8:15. The morning sun had burned off the thin layer of fog that clung to the lava field at dawn. Clear weather, light wind from the northeast. Good conditions for work. Her satellite phone rang. Elena pulled it from her pack, saw Bjorn's name on the screen. She stared at it for 3 rings before answering. "You're up early," she said, keeping her voice level. "Couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about that thermal signature you're chasing." Bjorn's voice crackled with static. "How's it looking?" "Interesting. The steam pattern is unusual. Perfect spiral formation. Very stable." "Perfect spiral. Elena, that's not natural." "I know." A pause on the line. "You okay? You sound tired." She looked at the vent, at the worn stones, at her GPS unit showing those 7 perfect circles. Didn't sleep well. It's colder up here than I expected. Weather report shows a front moving in tomorrow afternoon. Heavy cloud cover, possibly rain. You should think about wrapping up early. I will. I just want another night of observations. Another pause, longer this time. Elena, if something feels wrong, trust your gut. Don't stay out there just to prove a point. I'm fine, Bjorn, really. Just some interesting geology that needs proper documentation. Call me tonight at 6. Don't make me come looking for you. 6 p.m., I promise. She ended the call and looked at the vent. The steam spirals continued their precise rotation, unchanging, beautiful, and wrong in equal measure. Bjorn was right. She should leave, pack up her equipment, hike out, come back with a full team and proper support. Instead, she pulled out her journal and began sketching the wear patterns in the stone. She needed to understand this. Needed to know what had made her walk those circles while her conscious mind slept, and whether she'd do it again tonight. Elena packed her gear with methodical precision. First aid kit, water filter, emergency beacon. She checked each item against her mental inventory. Everything was accounted for. Her satellite phone showed full battery, 3 bars of signal strength. She pulled up Bjorn's contact and hesitated. What would she tell him? That she'd sleepwalked 4 miles in perfect circles. He'd call for an emergency extraction. Her research permit would be flagged. 6 years of building credibility gone. She pocketed the phone without calling. The thermal vent sat 200 yards south, steam rising in those impossible spirals. Elena shouldered her pack and walked toward it. At 50 yards, she pulled out her compass. The needle spun lazily, unable to settle on magnetic north. Magnetic anomaly. That made sense near geothermal features. But those compasses flickered, wavered. This one spun like it was mounted on a motor. She marked the position with a rock cairn and continued forward. At 30 yards, her GPS unit beeped. The position lock had failed. The screen showed her coordinates jumping erratically. After 2 minutes, it locked again, placing her exactly where she'd been standing, 20 yards from the vent. The steam rose in tight spirals, each rotation perfectly timed. The morning sun caught the steam, and she could see the mathematical perfection, Fibonacci spirals, the same pattern found in seashells and galaxies. Nature made these patterns, but never this exact. She pulled out her thermal camera. 194 degrees Fahrenheit at the source, normal range for Icelandic thermal features. She walked a slow circle around it, recording temperature readings. All normal, except for the steam. Elena knelt and examined the ground. Around the vent, in a perfect circle roughly 15 feet in diameter, the surface looked worn, like thousands of footsteps had polished the rough basalt into something approaching glass. She pulled out her voice recorder. Day 2, 6:47 a.m., documenting anomalous wear patterns around the thermal feature. Approximately 15-foot radius. The wear is uniform, suggesting regular use over an extended period. She paused. The wear pattern matches the GPS track from last night. Elena spent the next hour photographing the vent from every angle. She documented everything with focused intensity, gathering evidence that what she was seeing was real. Her scheduled check-in with Bjorn was at 6 p.m., 14 hours away. She thought about the wear patterns. Not from one night of walking. Those stones had been polished, smooth over years, maybe decades. Other people had been here. Other people had walked these circles. Elena set up her equipment at 25 yards from the vent. Seismometer, air quality monitor, temperature probe. She linked everything to her laptop and started recording data. The coffee she'd made had gone cold. She drank it anyway. 8:15. Clear weather, light wind from the northeast. Her satellite phone rang. You're up early, she said. Couldn't sleep. How's it looking? Interesting. The steam pattern is unusual. Perfect spiral formation, very stable. Perfect spiral. Elena, that's not natural. I know. A pause. You okay? You sound tired. She looked at the vent, at the worn stones, at her GPS showing those 7 circles. Didn't sleep well. It's colder up here than I expected. Weather report shows a front moving in tomorrow afternoon. You should wrap up early. I just want another night of observations. Elena, if something feels wrong, trust your gut. I'm fine, Bjorn. Just some interesting geology that needs documentation. Call me tonight at 6 p.m., I promise. She ended the call. The steam spirals continued their precise rotation, unchanging, beautiful, and wrong. Bjorn was right. She should leave. Instead, she pulled out her journal and began sketching the wear patterns. She needed to know what had made her walk those circles while her conscious mind slept. By noon, Elena had mapped the area within 100 yards of the vent. 3 cairns marked where her compass failed, 2 spots where her GPS lost signal. Everywhere within that 15-foot radius, the stones showed that telltale polish. She ate lunch without tasting it. Protein bar, dried fruit, water. Her equipment hummed quietly. The seismometer showed normal tremors. Air quality stayed clean. Everything measured normal. Everything looked wrong. Elena pulled up the satellite imagery. The coordinates placed this vent in an area that should have been surveyed 3 times. None of those surveys had documented a thermal feature here. She checked the thermal satellite scans from the past 5 years. A faint heat signature appeared in 2019 data. It strengthened in 2021. By last year, it showed clearly as an active thermal source. The vent was new, or recently reactivated. She thought about the worn stones. Those didn't get polished in 3 years. Elena walked to the edge of the worn circle. She knelt and ran her palm across the surface, cold to the touch despite proximity to the vent. She pulled out her geology hammer and tapped the stone. It rang with a clear, high tone. Regular basalt sounded dull. This resonated like metal. She struck it harder. The tone held for 3 seconds. Her phone showed 2:17 p.m. Elena packed a day pack and started walking northeast. At 60 yards from the vent, her compass steadied. At 80 yards, it pointed true north. She marked the spot and set up her backup air monitor. The wind shifted. Elena caught a scent, not sulfur. Metallic, sharp, like ozone after lightning. She checked her air monitor. No electrical storm in the forecast. The smell faded. Elena looked back at the vent. She pulled out her binoculars and focused on the center. Something moved. Elena steadied the binoculars. The movement came again, not in the steam, but in the air around the vent. A shimmer, like heat distortion, except the temperature wasn't high enough. The shimmer rippled outward in a perfect circle. She adjusted the focus. The shimmer pulsed with a rhythm she could count. 1 pulse every 7 seconds. Exactly 7 seconds, no variation. Her scientific training fought against the knot forming in her stomach. Some explainable atmospheric phenomenon. Except she'd worked around thermal vents for 6 years and never seen air behave like this. She photographed it anyway. Then she started back toward her equipment station. 4:37 p.m., less than 90 minutes until her check-in. Her tent sat 200 yards north of the vent. Elena stopped halfway there. Last night she'd pitched her tent 50 meters south. This morning 200 yards north. The movement had been directly away from the vent, along a precise radial line. She pulled out her GPS and checked yesterday's coordinates. Then she plotted the vector. The line ran perfectly through the vent's center point. She'd been moved along a radius. Elena opened her mapping software and overlaid last night's GPS track. 7 circles centered on the vent. Then the walk to her current position, a straight line radiating outward. She was seeing a pattern. Her equipment station showed 4 hours of recorded data. Elena downloaded it and started reviewing. Temperature steady, seismic activity minimal. Then at 11:43 a.m., a spike. The seismometer had detected a tremor lasting 0.3 seconds. But the waveform looked wrong. Too regular, almost like a signal. She ran the waveform through her analysis software. 7 hertz, a pure tone at 7 cycles per second. 7 circles around the vent. 7 seconds between the shimmer pulses. Now a 7 hertz signal. Elena closed her laptop. The steam spirals continued their rotation, beautiful and precise and impossible. She thought about the clean boots, the relocated tent, the 4 hours of missing memory. Her satellite phone alarm beeped, 6 p.m. Elena held the phone for a full minute before dialing. The truth would sound insane, but lying meant staying out here alone with whatever was happening. She pressed dial. Right on time, Bjorn answered. How's the weather holding? Clear so far. And the vent, still showing those spiral patterns. Elena watched the steam rotate. Yes, I've been running measurements all day. Bjorn, there's something off about this site. Off how? The magnetic field is unstable within 100 yards. My compass won't hold north. GPS drops signal. And there's evidence of previous activity. Wear patterns that suggest long-term foot traffic. Silence, then. Foot traffic, like a hiking trail. No, circular patterns around the vent, like people have been walking around it for years. But the vent only appeared on thermal scans 3 years ago. I know. More silence. Elena, are you feeling okay? Any headaches, nausea? I'm fine. My vitals are normal. Air quality is clean. I'm just documenting anomalies. Anomalies that include evidence. People have been visiting an unmapped vent that didn't exist until recently. When he said it like that, it sounded crazy. Elena looked at her laptop, at the 7 Hz waveform. I have data, seismic recordings, photographs, GPS tracks. Something unusual is happening here. Then come back, we'll analyze it properly. I need one more night of observations. Elena, the weather's good, I have supplies. If I leave and it stops, we might never document it again. She could hear him typing. The front hits tomorrow afternoon. If you're staying, you need to evacuate by noon. I will be. Promise me you'll check in at 6 a.m. tomorrow. If I don't hear from you, I'm calling search and rescue. 6 a.m., I promise. Elena ended the call. The sun was setting, painting the lava field in amber and shadow. Temperature dropping, 54 degrees and falling. She needed to set up her camera. If she was going to walk those circles again tonight, and something told her she would, she wanted video evidence. Elena positioned her phone inside the tent, angled to capture the door and her sleeping bag. She set it to record continuously, external battery pack attached. 8 hours of recording time. She checked the battery. 100%. Checked the angle. Perfect view of where she'd be sleeping. Then she stepped outside and looked at the vent one more time before darkness fell. The steam spirals glowed faintly in the twilight, like they were producing their own light. This story takes time to craft. If you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Elena ate dinner inside her tent as full darkness settled over the lava field. Freeze-dried pasta rehydrated with boiled water, a protein bar, half a liter of water. She forced herself through the mechanical routine of eating, though her stomach felt tight. The tent's interior glowed with the light from her headlamp, casting sharp shadows on the nylon walls. She checked her equipment one more time. Phone recording, red light blinking steadily, gas monitor on, displaying normal readings. Her GPS unit sat next to her sleeping bag, tracking enabled. If she moved tonight, it would log every step. 10 p.m. Outside, the wind had died completely. The silence pressed against her eardrums like physical pressure. Elena turned off her headlamp and looked through the tent's mesh window. The vent's steam spirals were clearly visible even in darkness, glowing with that faint luminescence she'd noticed at sunset. Not bright enough to illuminate the surrounding lava field, but distinct against the black sky. She tried to read through her field notes, reviewing the day's data, but her eyes kept drifting back to that window, to the impossible spirals rotating with mechanical precision in the dark. Elena set an alarm on her watch for every 2 hours. If she could wake herself periodically, maybe she could catch the moment when whatever was happening began. She settled into her sleeping bag, fully clothed except for her boots. Those sat just outside the tent door, muddy from the day's hiking. She wanted to see if they'd be clean again by morning. Her mind ran through possible explanations, each one failing against the evidence. Sleepwalking didn't clean boots, it didn't move tents. It didn't produce 7 Hz seismic signals or make air shimmer in perfect circles. She'd documented anomalies that defied every rational framework she'd built over 6 years of geological research. The watch on her wrist showed 10:23 p.m. Elena closed her eyes and focused on her breathing. Slow inhale through the nose, hold for 4 counts. Exhale through the mouth. A meditation technique she'd learned years ago for managing field stress. It usually helped her sleep in unfamiliar locations. Tonight it felt like trying to relax on a railroad track while a train approached. She opened her eyes again. 10:28. The phone's recording light still blinked steadily. The gas monitor glowed green. everything normal. Everything ready to document whatever happened next. Elena forced her eyes closed again. She needed to sleep, needed to let whatever was going to happen, happen. Fighting it wouldn't help. The data would tell the story. The GPS, the video, the seismometer. They'd capture the truth even if her conscious mind couldn't. Her last coherent thought before sleep took her was about the worn stones around the vent. How many people had lain here just like this, trying to stay awake, trying to understand? How many had walked those circles before her, their boots polishing the basalt smooth over years or decades or longer? The watch on her wrist showed 10:41 when her breathing deepened into sleep. At 11:43 p.m., her eyes opened. But Elena wasn't behind them anymore. The body that had been Elena Volkov sat up in the sleeping bag. The movement was smooth, mechanical, without the usual grogginess of someone waking from deep sleep. Her hands reached for the tent zipper and pulled it down in one continuous motion. No hesitation, no fumbling in the dark. She crawled out of the tent into the night air. The temperature had dropped to 38 degrees, cold enough that her breath should have misted. It didn't. She stood balanced perfectly despite the uneven volcanic ground and looked toward the vent. The steam spirals glowed brighter now, pulsing with that 7-second rhythm. Each pulse sent a ripple of light across the lava field, illuminating the worn circle of stone around the vent's base. Elena's body walked toward it. Her footsteps were precise, each one landing exactly 31 inches from the last. The same mechanical spacing the GPS had recorded the previous night. She reached the edge of the worn circle and stopped. For 3 seconds, she stood motionless, facing the vent. Then she stepped onto the polished stone and began walking clockwise around the circumference. The phone in the tent continued recording. The gas monitor displayed normal readings. The seismometer detected her footsteps as faint tremors in the earth. Regular, metronomic, spaced exactly 0.47 seconds apart. Inside Elena's mind, something still existed. A small corner of consciousness that hadn't been completely submerged. It watched through her eyes like a passenger in a vehicle she no longer controlled. She could see the vent approaching with each circuit, could feel her feet touching the cold stone, could sense the night air on her skin, but she couldn't stop walking, couldn't change direction, couldn't even slow her pace. The corner of her mind that was still Elena tried to scream. Nothing happened. Her body continued its steady circuit, boots striking stone with mechanical precision. First circle complete. She began the second without pause. The shimmer she'd seen through binoculars earlier was visible now with her naked eye. It pulsed outward from the vent with each 7-second cycle, a wave of distortion that made the air itself seem to ripple like water. When it passed through her body, Elena felt a sensation like falling, though her feet never left the ground. Second circle complete, beginning the third. That small conscious part of Elena's mind noticed something new. With each circuit, the vent's glow intensified, the steam spirals rotated faster, and the 7-second pulse quickened. 6.8 seconds now, then 6.5. The rhythm was accelerating. Third circle complete, beginning the fourth. Her watch showed 12:37 a.m. She'd been walking for 54 minutes. Her legs should have been tired. Her breathing should have been elevated. But her body moved with the same steady precision as when she'd started. No fatigue, no variation in pace. Fourth circle complete, beginning the fifth. The conscious fragment of Elena's mind tried desperately to reassert control. Move your hand, blink your eyes, do something. But her body belonged to the pattern now, locked into the geometric precision of the circles. She was a marker on a compass, scribing arcs around a fixed point. Fifth circle complete, beginning the sixth. The shimmer pulses came faster now, 5.2 seconds between each wave. The vent's glow lit the entire lava field in pulsing blue-white light. Elena's shadow stretched and contracted with each pulse, a dark mark on luminescent stone. Sixth circle complete, beginning the seventh. The seventh circle was different. Elena felt it the moment her foot touched the worn stone to begin the final circuit. A resistance like walking through water that grew thicker with each step. Her body pushed forward with the same mechanical precision, but something in the air itself was changing, solidifying. The shimmer pulses accelerated to 3.1 seconds. The vent's glow blazed bright enough to cast hard shadows across the lava field. Inside that trapped corner of her consciousness, Elena felt pressure building. Not physical, but something deeper, like reality itself was being compressed around the vent. Halfway through the seventh circle, her watch showed 1:53 a.m. The shimmer hit her, and this time she felt it differently. Not just the sensation of falling, but of being pulled, stretched thin like taffy between two fixed points. The conscious part of her mind screamed silently as her sense of self began to fragment. She was walking the circle and standing at the vent simultaneously. She was here now and she was years ago, and she was decades in the future, all at once. 3/4 through the seventh circle, images flashed through her fragmented consciousness. Other people walking the same path. A man in clothes from the 1990s, his face locked in the same expressionless mask hers must be wearing. A woman in older clothing, maybe 1970s. Further back, figures in rough wool and leather from decades or centuries before. All of them walking, circling, marking the boundary while something pulled at their consciousness. The pattern was old, ancient. It had been repeating for far longer than thermal satellites had been watching Iceland's highlands. Elena's body reached the point where the seventh circle would close. One more step and the pattern would complete. The shimmer pulses came every 1.8 seconds now, the vent blazing like a beacon. That pressure she'd felt kept building, building, like a wave about to crest. Her foot lifted for the final step, and something in that trapped corner of her mind, that last fragment of Elena Volkov that hadn't been subsumed by the pattern, made a choice. She stopped. Her foot hung in the air, mid-step, 12 inches from completing the seventh circle. The mechanical precision of her movement faltered. For one instant, consciousness and compulsion fought for control of her body. The vent's glow flickered. The shimmer pulses stuttered, rhythm breaking. Elena's body stood frozen, caught between completing the pattern and breaking free. Her foot trembled in the air. Sweat broke out on her forehead. The first physical response she'd shown in over 2 hours of walking. The pressure around the vent intensified. The air itself seemed to scream, a frequency just below hearing that made her bones vibrate. Her foot began lowering toward the stone, pulled by the pattern's imperative to complete. But Elena fought. That fragment of consciousness that remained herself pushed back against whatever force controlled her body. Not much. Just enough to shift her weight, angle her foot 6 inches to the left. Her boot touched stone outside the circle's boundary. The pattern broke. The vent's glow exploded outward in a blinding flash. Elena's body flew backward like she'd been hit by a truck, landing hard on volcanic rock 15 feet from the worn circle. The shimmer pulses stopped. The glow vanished. The night went completely, absolutely dark, and Elena Volkov's consciousness slammed back into her body like a fist. Elena gasped, sucking in air like she'd been held underwater. Her lungs burned. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She lay on her back on cold stone, staring up at stars, and for several seconds couldn't remember her own name. Then it came rushing back. The circles, the walking, the terrible sensation of being a passenger in her own body while something else drove it forward. She'd broken the pattern, stepped outside the circle on the seventh rotation, and the vent had thrown her backward like she'd touched a live wire. Elena tried to sit up. Pain lanced through her left shoulder. She rolled onto her right side instead, pushing herself up with one arm. Her watch showed 2:08 a.m. She'd been unconscious for 15 minutes. Her body ached like she'd been running or fighting. Her muscles trembled with exhaustion deeper than 2 hours of walking should have caused. She fumbled for her headlamp and switched it on. The beam cut through darkness, illuminating volcanic rock and scattered equipment. Her GPS unit lay 10 feet away, screen cracked but still glowing. Elena stood slowly, testing her weight. Her left ankle protested but held. The shoulder hurt, but she could move it, no broken bones. She picked up the GPS unit. The screen was cracked but functional. She pulled up the track log. 6 complete circles around the vent, each one mathematically perfect. Then the 7th, incomplete. The track showed her walking 328 degrees around the circumference. Then a straight line radiating outward, where she'd stepped outside the boundary. After that, nothing. The GPS had stopped recording at 1:59 a.m. She checked her watch against the timestamp. 9 minutes of missing data. 9 minutes when her position hadn't been logged. Elena's stomach turned. She dry heaved twice before the sensation passed. The vent. She needed to see it. She turned her headlamp toward it, expecting to see those perfect steam spirals. Instead, she saw nothing. No glow. No steam. The volcanic rock looked dark, cold, lifeless. Elena walked toward it carefully. At 20 yards, she stopped and pulled out her thermal camera, aimed it at where the vent should be. The screen showed ambient temperature, 41 degrees. No heat signature at all. The vent had gone completely cold. Elena approached slowly, thermal camera raised. The opening that had been producing those perfect spirals now looked like any other crack in the basalt, maybe 2 feet across, dark and silent. She knelt at the edge. Her headlamp beam probed into the opening. It went down about 4 feet before narrowing to nothing. No heat shimmer, no sulfur smell. She held her hand over it. Nothing but cold night air. The vent was dead. Elena pulled out her gas monitor and took readings. Carbon dioxide normal. Hydrogen sulfide 0. The air around the vent was cleaner than ambient atmosphere. She examined the worn circle of stone. In her headlamp beam, the polished surface looked the same. Smooth, almost glassy. But when she touched it, something was different. The stone felt warm. Not hot, just warm. Maybe 60 degrees, significantly higher than ambient temperature. She pressed her palm flat. Definite warmth. Elena pulled out her infrared thermometer, 63 degrees Fahrenheit. She moved to unpolished rock 3 feet away, 41 degrees. Back to the worn circle, 63 degrees. The stone itself was holding heat, even though the vent had gone cold. She walked the circumference, taking readings. The worn stone averaged 22 degrees warmer than surrounding rock. The entire circle was radiating heat. Her watch showed 2:28 a.m., 20 minutes since the vent had gone cold. The circle should be cooling fast. Instead, it held steady. Her equipment station sat 25 yards away, still running. Elena checked the seismometer data. The last 2 hours showed her footsteps, regular tremors at 0.47-second intervals. Then at 1:59 a.m., a massive spike. Magnitude 3.1, lasting 1.3 seconds. A 3.1 earthquake was strong enough to be felt for miles, but Elena had felt it as that blinding flash and nothing more. She scrolled forward past the spike. After 2 a.m., the seismometer showed nothing. No tremors, no background noise. Not even the normal micro vibrations Iceland's crust produced constantly. The Earth itself had gone silent. Elena downloaded the data to her laptop. She needed to get back to her tent, get warm, review the phone video. Part of her was afraid to watch her own body walking those circles. The other part needed to understand what had controlled her and why breaking the pattern had stopped it. She packed her laptop and started back. Behind her, the dead vent sat silent, but that circle of worn stone continued to radiate its impossible warmth. Elena crawled into her tent and checked her phone. Still recording. Battery pack showed 42%. She stopped the recording and pulled up the video file. 3 hours, 27 minutes of footage. She dragged the timeline to 11:43 p.m. The video showed her lying in the sleeping bag, eyes closed. Then at 11:43, her eyes snapped open, unfocused, staring at nothing. For 3 seconds, she lay still. Then she sat up in one smooth motion and reached for the tent zipper. Elena watched herself crawl out of frame. The tent's interior stayed empty. The gas monitor showed green throughout. She fast-forwarded to 1:59 a.m. The tent remained empty. Then a flash of light so bright it whited out the camera's sensor. 1.3 seconds of pure white. When the image returned, it showed only the dark interior. Elena kept watching. At 2:14 a.m., 6 minutes before she'd regained consciousness, the tent door unzipped from outside. Her body crawled back in. She watched herself lie down in the sleeping bag, close her eyes, and go completely still. She paused the video. Her face looked slack, expressionless, not sleeping, just empty. Elena rewound and played it in slow motion. Her movements were jerky, uncoordinated. She'd crawled through the door, dragged herself to the sleeping bag, and collapsed. like a puppet whose strings had been cut. 15 minutes missing in the middle. 15 minutes when she'd been somewhere between the vent and tent, doing something the GPS hadn't recorded, and her mind couldn't remember. Elena checked her body for signs of what she'd done. Her clothes were intact. Her hands showed no fresh cuts. She checked her arms. Nothing. Lifted her shirt and checked her torso. No marks except the bruising on her shoulder. But her boots. She looked at them outside the tent door. Spotless. Every trace of mud and dust cleaned away. The leather was damp, like they'd been washed. During those missing 15 minutes, something had cleaned her boots again. Elena's stomach clenched. She grabbed her water bottle and drank. The water was cold, clean, ordinary. She was in her tent. The vent was dead. Whatever had been controlling her had stopped when she broke the pattern. She was safe now, except she didn't feel safe. She felt like she'd stepped on a landmine and heard the click, but the explosion hadn't come yet. Her satellite phone showed 2:47 a.m., 3 hours until her scheduled check-in with Bjorn. She needed to decide, activate her emergency beacon now and call for immediate extraction, or wait until morning and report everything she'd documented. If she called now, they'd pull her out within hours. But they might flag this site as unsafe, restrict future access. Everything she'd learned might be buried in safety protocols. If she waited, she could document more. Take samples from the warm stone, run tests, build a complete picture. But waiting meant spending another 3 hours in the dark with a vent that might reactivate. Elena made her decision. She'd wait. 3 more hours wouldn't kill her, and she needed samples from that warm stone. Evidence that would prove this wasn't hallucination or equipment malfunction. She dressed in her warmest layers and grabbed sample bags from her equipment kit, her geology hammer, her headlamp, the thermal camera to document everything. At 3:02 a.m., she stepped back outside. The lava field looked different in the pre-dawn darkness. Emptier, like something had been sucked out of the landscape when the vent went cold. Elena walked back to the worn circle, boots crunching on volcanic rock. She knelt at the edge and struck the polished stone with her hammer. A chip broke free, about the size of a quarter. She bagged it immediately, labeled it with location and time. The stone underneath the polished surface looked normal. Gray basalt, nothing unusual. She took 3 more samples around the circle. Each one showed the same thing. Whatever had changed the stone's surface hadn't penetrated deep. Just the top layer, maybe half an inch, had been transformed into that smooth, warm material. Elena checked her thermal camera. The circle still read 63 degrees. Hadn't cooled at all in the 30 minutes since she'd first measured it. That violated basic thermodynamics. Heat dissipated. Always. But this stone held its temperature like it was connected to a power source that no longer existed. She photographed everything. Wide shots of the dead vent. Close-ups of the sample locations. Thermal images showing the heat signature of the circle. If the vent reactivated and she didn't make it out, at least the data would survive on her camera's memory card. At 3:28 a.m., Elena packed her samples and walked back to her tent. She had 2.5 hours until the check-in. She'd use them to analyze the stone samples, review all her data one more time, and prepare her report for Bjorn. Because after tonight, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wasn't coming back here. Whatever this place was, whatever the vent represented, it was beyond her ability to handle alone. She'd broken the pattern once. She wouldn't risk walking those circles again. Elena made her decision. She'd wait. 3 more hours wouldn't kill her, and she needed samples from that warm stone. Evidence that would prove this wasn't hallucination or equipment malfunction. She dressed in her warmest layers and grabbed sample bags from her equipment kit, her geology hammer, her headlamp, the thermal camera to document everything. At 3:02 a.m., she stepped back outside. The lava field looked different in the pre-dawn darkness. Emptier, like something had been sucked out of the landscape when the vent went cold. Elena walked back to the worn circle, boots crunching on volcanic rock. She knelt at the edge and struck the polished stone with her hammer. A chip broke free, about the size of a quarter. She bagged it immediately, labeled it with location and time. The stone underneath looked normal, gray basalt, nothing unusual. She took 3 more samples around the circle. Each one showed the same thing. Whatever had changed the stone's surface hadn't penetrated deep. Just the top layer, maybe half an inch, had been transformed into that smooth, warm material. Elena checked her thermal camera. The circle still read 63 degrees. Hadn't cooled at all in the 30 minutes since she'd first measured it. That violated basic thermodynamics. Heat dissipated, always. But this stone held its temperature like it was connected to a power source that no longer existed. She photographed everything. Wide shots of the dead vent, close-ups of the sample locations, thermal images showing the heat signature. If the vent reactivated and she didn't make it out, at least the data would survive on her camera's memory card. At 3:28 a.m., Elena packed her samples and walked back to her tent. She had 2.5 hours until the check-in. She'd use them to analyze the stone samples, review all her data, and prepare her report for Bjorn. Because after tonight, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wasn't coming back here. Whatever this place was, whatever the vent represented, it was beyond her ability to handle alone. She'd broken the pattern once. She wouldn't risk walking those circles again. Elena spread her equipment across the tent floor. Laptop, samples, thermal camera, GPS units, voice recorder. 6 years of geological training, and she'd never seen anything like this. The samples looked like ordinary volcanic rock. Felt like ordinary rock, but they radiated heat that shouldn't exist. She pulled out her field microscope and examined the polished surface of the first sample. Under magnification, the smooth exterior showed a crystalline structure she didn't recognize. Not basalt, not any igneous rock formation she'd studied. The crystals were arranged in geometric patterns, hexagons within hexagons, repeating down to the microscopic level, the same pattern as the Fibonacci spirals in the steam. Elena photographed the microscope view and made notes. At 4:17 a.m., she heard something that made her freeze, a sound like wind chimes, distant and metallic. She grabbed her headlamp and unzipped the tent door. The vent was glowing again. Not the same bright pulse from before. This glow was fainter, flickering, like a candle struggling against wind. Elena stepped out and walked toward it, pulse hammering in her throat. She stopped at 50 yards. The steam spirals were back, but wrong. They rotated counterclockwise now, unwinding instead of tightening. And they moved slowly, erratically, like a mechanism running down. The shimmer appeared in stuttering pulses, irregular, arrhythmic. Elena pulled out her thermal camera. The vent showed a heat signature of 84 degrees Fahrenheit. Warm, but nowhere near the 194 it had registered yesterday. The temperature was rising, though. As she watched, it climbed to 87 degrees, 91, 94. The vent was trying to reactivate. She checked her watch. 4:22 a.m. 1 hour and 38 minutes until her check-in with Bjorn. If she was going to leave, she needed to start packing now. But she couldn't move. She stood watching the temperature climb, the steam spirals slowly gaining speed and coordination. 98 degrees, 103, 109. The worn circle of stone began to glow. Faint at first, then stronger. That same blue-white luminescence from last night. Elena could see it clearly now. The entire 15-foot circle radiating light, pulsing in rhythm with the vent's heat signature. She pulled out her phone and started recording video. Whatever was happening, she'd document it. This was data, evidence, proof that the phenomenon was real and repeatable. The thermal camera showed 117 degrees now, 123. The temperature was climbing faster, accelerating toward whatever threshold would fully reactivate the vent. Elena's gas monitor alarm went off. She looked down at the display, carbon dioxide levels spiking. Hydrogen sulfide detected. The vent was starting to emit gases again. She was standing too close, but her feet wouldn't move. She stood frozen, watching the temperature climb. 131 degrees, 142. The wind chime sound grew louder. Not wind chimes, the sound was coming from the worn stones. They were resonating, vibrating at a frequency just at the edge of hearing. The same way the seismometer had recorded that 7 Hz signal yesterday. The pattern was trying to reassert itself. The vent wanted to complete what she'd interrupted by breaking the 7th circle. 156 degrees, 168. Elena's legs finally obeyed her. She stumbled backward, putting distance between herself and the vent. Her gas monitor showed carbon dioxide at 2,000 parts per million and rising. Dangerous levels. She needed to get back to her tent, grab her emergency beacon, activate it now. She turned and ran. Behind her, the vent's temperature hit 173 degrees and stopped climbing. The steam spirals locked into their perfect geometric rotation. Clockwise again. Precise. Beautiful. Hungry. Elena burst into her tent and grabbed her emergency beacon from her equipment bag. Her hands shook as she flipped open the protective cover and pressed the activation button. The LED blinked red 3 times, then turned solid green. Signal transmitted. Search and rescue would receive her coordinates within minutes. She checked her satellite phone. 4:31 a.m. Still no signal bars. But the emergency beacon operated on a different frequency, designed to punch through interference. It would get through. Elena started packing with systematic urgency. Sleeping bag stuffed into its compression sack. Laptop and hard drives into their protective cases. Sample bags, voice recorder, cameras. Everything critical went into her main pack first. The data mattered more than anything else. Outside, that wind chime sound grew louder. The frequency was changing, rising in pitch. Elena zipped her pack and crawled to the tent door. Through the mesh window, she could see the vent glowing brighter. The worn circle pulsed with light, each pulse synchronized with the rising tone from the stones. Her watch showed 4:39 a.m. Sunrise was at 6:15, less than 2 hours until daylight. If she could hold out until then, visibility would improve. The rescue helicopter could spot her more easily. The sound changed again. Lower now, deeper, a thrumming that she felt in her chest more than heard. 7 pulses, then silence. 7 pulses, then silence. The pattern establishing itself again. Elena looked at her boots by the tent door. She needed them. Couldn't hike out across the lava field in just socks. But the thought of putting them on made her skin crawl. Something had cleaned them. Something had touched them during that 15-minute gap. She reached for them anyway. Her fingers were 6 inches away when she noticed something new. The leather wasn't just clean, it was arranged differently. Yesterday, she'd left them toed in toward each other. Now they sat in perfect parallel, toes pointing directly toward the vent. Elena pulled her hand back. She had spare shoes in her pack. Trail runners. Not as warm, but better than nothing. She'd wear those. She was digging through her pack when she heard footsteps outside the tent. Slow, measured, each one landing exactly 31 inches from the last. The mechanical spacing from her GPS tracks. Elena froze. The footsteps circled her tent once. Stopped at the door. She could see a shadow through the nylon, backlit by the vent's glow. Human-shaped, standing perfectly still. Then a voice. Her voice, speaking from outside the tent. 7 circles, it said. The pattern must complete. Elena's throat closed. That was her voice, but she wasn't speaking. The shadow at the door wasn't casting from her body. 7 circles, her voice repeated. Then you can leave. Then it ends. The shadow moved away. The footsteps resumed, walking back toward the vent. Elena crawled to the mesh window and looked out. A figure walked across the lava field. Same height as her, same build, wearing clothes identical to what she'd worn yesterday. Moving with that same puppet-like precision she'd seen in the tent video. The vent had made a copy of her, or pulled something from those missing 15 minutes. A recording of her walking the pattern, now playing back without her consciousness inside it. The figure reached the worn circle and began walking. First rotation starting, 6 more to go. If this story meant something to you, drop a comment and share it. It helps the next person find their way here.